Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Political State from the Oklahoman. I'm Ben Felder on another Friday afternoon, and the legislative session has come to an end. We're going to talk about that. The Political State crew, Dale and Justin, are going to be in the studio with me later on in this episode to discuss everything that we saw and what to expect in the coming weeks and months. But joining me for this first segment is our guest this week is Liz Waggoner of the Oklahoma Women's Coalition. Liz, thanks so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Happy to be here.
Well, like I just mentioned, the legislative session has come to an end, so a lot of looking forward.
Yes.
But I think we still need to look back because a lot of things happened this legislative session, and maybe the biggest issue is still the 2-week teacher walkout.
Yep.
And the impact that it had on the legislature. Obviously, the tax increases and teacher pay and education funding increases that went into effect right before the walkout, and then some additional things that came out there. I'm just kind of curious to get your take as someone who's observing, the action of the Capitol, observing the advocacy effort that we saw for 2 weeks. I mean, what were your major takeaways from this?
Well, as a public education supporter, my kids go to Oklahoma City Public Schools, and as an advocacy junkie, I was thrilled. We see lobby days, every day at the Capitol is some special interest day, and then people leave and go home, and those issues aren't prioritized anymore. And so to see this consistent surge and see the community, the business community, the nonprofit sector, I mean, everyone across the state overwhelmingly supported the teacher walkout. And so I think for me, I was just like having a Braveheart moment, go for it, go get it. And obviously, as an advocacy organization, our main goal is to empower people to advocate for the issues that are important to them, to use their voice. And so to see people up at the Capitol who probably have never been there, or maybe have taken a field trip there or something when they were younger, but this is their house. This is their building. It's the people's house. And so for them to show up and to use their voices, to learn who their legislators are, understand a little bit more about the legislative process, face some of the same frustrations that advocates face on a daily basis and lobbyists face on a daily basis with trying to communicate with legislators. Sometimes there's a disconnect. While there were frustrations, overwhelmingly I was so encouraged to see them be so consistent and stick with it for that amount of time. Yeah, I don't think anyone expected them to stay that long.
No, I think you're exactly right. Frustration is nothing new at the Capitol.
Right.
It's nothing new. It's not unique to Oklahoma, but especially in recent years, I mean, the frustration level has been high. And it's been interesting because in election years, you often hear there's so much frustration, voters are going to make a change. And, and for the most part, someone who's covered lots of elections, you get kind of cynical. You're like, well, things aren't going to change because elections are largely predictable in many ways when you kind of look at the key elements. Some people are predicting maybe another wave or change election, whether that means flip seats or whether that means more moderate members of certain parties and certain seats. I'm still kind of skeptical, but I also think skeptical that we'll see that kind of shift. But I also think that if we do see a shift, we can look back and say, well, they shut down schools for 2 weeks.
100%.
That definitely is going to have some kind of impact, right?
I believe, and I am also a skeptic when it comes to this sort of thing, because unfortunately legislators go back into their communities when they're campaigning and they say, I support public education, and everyone applauds and says, yay, they do. But no one actually checks to make sure that that is the case. And so now teachers, pro-education, people in the community, they know how to check. They know how to go to the website and look up votes. I mean, I've spoken with associations and agencies and groups who are kind of building support for like a pro-public education big push for those candidates, and they're actually going back to votes on public education funding bills for the last several years and pulling how members voted. So now when they go to those town halls and say, I'm pro-education, you can say, actually, on this bill, you voted no. You voted no against funding for public education. So how explain that discrepancy to us? So I think the level of engagement, the level of accountability, the level of awareness within our communities has absolutely gone up. And public education, the teacher walkout, not only did it demonstrate overwhelming public support for public education and for our teachers and educators, and for public employees and for state employees, it also absolutely solidify that public education is the #1 question that everyone is going to be asking when a candidate knocks on their door. What's your stance on this? You know, what did you think about the teacher walkout? I mean, we're seeing it in the gubernatorial debates. We're seeing it in all of those forums and all of those platforms. I'm a little less cynical than you this time.
Well, and just a preface, my cynicism is not because I have a horse in the race, but just in terms of, you know, wanting to, you know, whether or not how much drama there's going to be. But you're right when you say, you know, when you saw tens of thousands of teachers at the Capitol, and not just teachers, but parents and others, you know, I was kind of, one of the things I took away from it is how many who said they had never done this before. Not just that they had not had a walkout before, but that they had never come to the Capitol, they never talked to the lawmakers. And so if there is a heightened awareness, as there seems to be, and if everyone that rallied at the Capitol, if for the most part, if what happened influences what they decide to do, how they decide to vote, if they decide to vote, I mean, we saw such a large number that's going to have some kind of impact. You know, one thing I wanted to ask you about is, you know, in your organization that's advocating for women and girls here across the state, and when we're talking about the teaching profession, this is a women's issue.
You're going to get me on my platform. So, it absolutely is a women's issue.
And you know, there are some great, you know, male teachers out there, but this is a profession that's largely made up of females. You know, a few years ago, the New York Times education writer Dana Goldstein had a book called The Teacher's Wars. Or Teacher Wars, and I read it a few years ago, and after the walkout, I reread it, and I was in a coffee shop, and someone asked me about the book, and said, well, what's this book about in a nutshell? It's about the history of the teaching profession. And I said, you know, I don't know any better way of putting it than teachers face such large obstacles, mainly because it's made up of females. I mean, even since the early days of the profession, women were targeted as teachers because there was a thought that we could pay them less. I mean, so even since the very beginning. 100%. So anyways, all that to say, I mean, talk a little bit about just how important of a women's rights issue it is when we're talking about you know, labor issues among educators. Yeah,
I mean, at the Coalition, one of our major issues and major platforms is pay transparency. Because we see it as a necessary component to starting to reduce the overwhelming wage gap, especially that we see in Oklahoma. What I wanted to kind of yell from the 4th floor rotunda during the teacher walkout was, this is absolutely a gender issue. This is absolutely because this profession is dominated by women, and unfortunately women throughout the country, but in Oklahoma, are not seen as capable, even if they have the same experience, education, you know, same job requirements and responsibilities. Even when you attribute for, you know, all of the other, like, you know, responsibilities and obligations within the job and all of those, you know, different education, there's still a large percentage of the wage gap that's unaccounted for, and it necessarily contributes to the implicit biases that we have against women in the workplace. You know, maybe it's just those unconscious, just generational, cyclical thoughts that we have and beliefs that we have about women working, women in the teaching profession, you know. Whether that be because they are an economic liability, because they have to take off more to take care of their families, or, you know, whatever the thought may be. So my goal as the Coalition is to engage educators and engage especially female teachers, but also our male allies in all of the issues that impact women in Oklahoma. So I know I spoke with a lot of teachers during the walkout, and especially after the walkout, there was a lot of frustration with, you know, we have all of this energy, we have all this frustration and passion, and we want to continue to fight for our kids and for our classrooms and for our schools. What do we do? How do we do it? Do we start an initiative petition? Many said, forget it, I'm running for office. If someone's going to do it, I'm going to do it by winning that seat. My #1, you know, message to those people is educate yourself on the other issues that are impacting women and impacting the most impoverished and disenfranchised populations in Oklahoma, because they all are connected. They all parallel and are a domino effect. When we don't adequately fund preventative services, when we don't adequately fund substance abuse mental health services, when we don't educate our educators on adverse childhood experiences and the impact they're having on kids and behavior, when we just treat the symptoms but we're not treating the root, we're not having a holistic approach to training families, you know, and starting to reduce the cycle of incarceration. Kiddos are we're judging them for not getting their homework done, but they don't have a parent at home, you know, consistently to ensure that. So this is a much bigger issue than just prioritizing public education, and it's a much bigger issue than just teacher pay. This is a systemic problem in Oklahoma. We have continually lacked prioritization of the most important parts of a healthy society. And another thing I want to tell the teachers and you know, anyone who came to the walkout in support of education, this is a culture shift. This is going to take a lot of time. Unfortunately, policy, and necessarily policy, takes time, especially good policy. Takes time to start to see a shift in how our society and how our culture prioritizes things. So we have to be consistent, and we have to be concise, and we have to be very organized in our messaging. And if you support public education, you should support criminal justice reform. If you support public education, you should support women's rights and economic opportunities for women. You should support pay transparency. You should support paid family leave. All of these things intersect. All of these things work together. And so be an advocate for all of the social justice issues and for all of the economic issues, because they all feed one another.
Yeah, well, that walkout is definitely, you know, a giant boulder in the lake that we've already seen the impact of those ripples. And you know, one way or another, I think that's going to continue this year. What that looks like in June in the election, in November, you know, in the general election remains to be seen. But it definitely seems like there's been somewhat of a shift, and it'll be interesting to watch and see how big of a shift or what the result of that looks like.
I'm excited. For the first time in a long time, I feel really optimistic about the level of civic engagement we're seeing, you know, not just in urban areas, but in rural Oklahoma as well. People know their legislators now, they know their state senator and their state representative, and they are feeling more confident in engaging them. And so we're going to see, I predict we're going to start to see a shift of the people who, obviously we saw record numbers of people run for office, which I would love to make that connection to the teacher walkout, and I think it's safe to do so. So I think we're going to start to see some ripples in starting to move toward a culture shift.
Yeah. Well, hey, let's bring you back on the show as we monitor those ripples throughout the year.
Absolutely, I'd love to.
Yeah, Liz Waggoner with the Oklahoma Women's Coalition. Thanks so much for your time. We appreciate it. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I'll be back with Dale and Justin as we continue this episode of Political State from the Oklahomans. Hello and welcome back to Political State from the Oklahoman here in segment 2. The Political State crew joining me here in studio, Dale and Justin, an ecstatic Dale because the legislative session has come to an end. We think, well, it has, but House and Senate members have gone home. Maybe they'll return later this summer. We'll get into that here in a moment. But you are, as you just said before we returned, are ecstatic about the end of another session, right?
Bursting with joy.
Yeah, but a little sad too. It's always like the end of the school year, right?
It is. I said my goodbyes with some legislators that I may never see again, or if it may be a long time, but certainly won't get to work with them day after day and chasing them down for quotes.
Well, when they all become lobbyists, you'll see.
Yeah, they'll come back.
You'll see them at the Capitol. You'll still get to get your yearbook signed. But so we saw last night, Thursday. The legislature broke. The budget was done.
Yes.
But some last-minute, maybe social issue grabs that we saw this week.
Yeah, we saw yesterday the adoption of the Ten Commandments bill. Kind of snuck up on everyone. That wasn't really a topic that was generating a lot of talk as the legislature wound down. But they approved a bill that would allow the placement of the Ten Commandments on government property. And they also approved Senate Bill 1140, which gained a lot of traction on social media. What that bill does is allow faith-based adoption agencies to continue their work with clients that meet their what they feel is religious convictions, basically, and also receive state funding to do so.
So this would be basically, an adoption agency could restrict adoption to a same-sex couple. That's kind of one of the scenarios that got a lot of it.
Yep, that is possible, and without worrying about losing their funding. their state funding.
Did you get? Let's talk about this one for a moment, because you're right. This one has received a lot of attention. It appears that there's been a lot of advocacy from groups that are pushing back, calling the governor's office. I mean, I know, obviously she hasn't told you what she's going to do, but do you get a sense that this might be one of those that actually is weighing kind of heavy with her? I mean, I'm sure she, philosophically agrees with it. I mean, as a conservative leader, but I wonder, when she's thinking about the image of the state and businesses that may want to be recruited here that don't look too fondly on these kind of issues. I mean, do you feel like this might be one to watch in terms of her veto pen?
I'm sure she may consider that, but it's also worth considering that there are other sort of similar laws that were being considered across the country, including one I think in Missouri that went a lot farther than the bill that she's being asked to sign. Essentially, the changes made in law here wouldn't necessarily change a whole lot from what's going on right now. Basically, it gives some immunity to these faith-based or religious adoption agencies to continue doing what they're doing now. The opponents say that it's state-sponsored discrimination.
Yeah. So we've got a little God, we also got a little guns.
We do.
Last week, right?
Yes, the legislature adopted constitutional carry. That's what it's called. Basically, it would allow anyone to carry a firearm, a handgun, or whatever you want to carry, without having a permit, concealed carry permit, and also the training that comes along with that. The OSBI, the state investigative agency that handles those permits, came out kind of against it, basically saying, listen, if you do away with this, if the governor were to sign it, if it were to become law, we would have a lot of would have people being able to carry around a firearm without getting a lot of background checks that aren't done at the moment of sale, at the point of sale, because the permitting process also comes with a series of background checks that focus on that look more towards state data rather than the national NCIC, I think. Anyway,
something like that.
Whatever the federal check is. Yeah. And also mental health records that are older than 2015. That's also something that OSBI looks at before they give someone a permit.
Yeah. It kind of felt like a kind of a reversal of sorts this year. This year was all kind of, messed up. It's just different in a lot of ways. Maybe messed up, I don't know. Of course, the walkout, had a big impact, that 2-week, showdown at the Capitol. The legislature got the budget done fairly early compared to years, and usually that's the last thing. It's done, the budget, and then they go home. But maybe it just seemed like maybe some legislators felt like, we were too focused on the budget. We didn't get a chance to get to the, for them, maybe some of the fun stuff that we usually are hearing a lot more on the early weeks. I mean, it's kind of seemed like we heard some of these social bills early on, but they didn't seem to get as much attention this year because of the budget, especially once teachers kind of came out and started threatening the walkout. So we got the budget done, and then,
well, here's the thing to think about, and the people who write the budget at the legislature, I think they're right in saying this, is that they've been working on the budget constantly for so long and so in depth that they were able to get it done within 2 months of coming to the Capitol for regular session, and usually this last month of May is when they would be voting or finalizing details of the budget, but they've already been working on it. And so by approving the budget early, they, and especially the education part, by April 1st, and the regular budget a little bit after that, there really wasn't a whole lot left to do. You had some bills that were sort of, that had to be done to maybe make fixes in law, or set some policies that Oklahoma needed with the change of alcohol modernization. Beyond that, it's all sort of discretionary bills. What a lawmaker might think is a good idea, trying to get that forward. But, I think there's a lot of fatigue at the legislature, and a lot of people wanted to get home as soon as possible, start campaigning and knocking on doors to explain their vote on the tax increase. And generally get as far away from the Capitol as they could, as soon as they could, because it's been pretty much a 15-month ride for them.
Yeah. And just yeah, now we're in election season full blown right now. I mean, a lot of members aren't running for re-election, so they're maybe kicking back, but a lot of members still are, and it's full-fledged focus towards the primaries right now.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about general elections, which will be a hot topic, but first you have the primaries, and you have a lot of Republicans going back to conservative districts that will have to explain their votes, or may even get blamed for votes that they didn't take, that the legislature took, things that the legislature passed. There was a tax increase, there was a budget that's larger than usual, and those are things that usually conservatives are not going to be big proponents of. So it'll be interesting. I'd like to follow some of those Republicans as they go back to districts and try to explain their votes, because it'll be interesting to see what they hear.
Yeah. Are we but we're expecting, the budget, the tax increase. I mean, I feel like that's going to be, a really central, theme in a lot of these races, right?
Yeah, especially if you're conservative and your district doesn't like tax increases. There could be a reckoning when a lawmaker comes home to explain themselves and explain why they did what they did. Or if they voted against the tax increase, explaining to people why they allegedly didn't support teachers and education. I think that'll be a predominant discussion over the next few months, especially during the primaries. And more so in the Republican primaries, where you have typically people who oppose tax increases.
Yeah, I think if you're a Democrat, you're probably feeling like, hey, this potential to be a good year for us. Not going to take back power or anything like that, but maybe we can pick up some seats. Voter frustration or Oklahoman frustration seems to be pretty high right now. But you haven't really seen, when you talk about the Republican primary, for a moment, when you look at the gubernatorial primary on the Republican side, you haven't necessarily seen that big shift to the middle. I mean, it's still, and even more so over the last couple of weeks, there's still this kind of competition to see who can flank someone to the right a little bit. Most of the candidates have continued to say that they were against the tax increase. I mean, hearing some candidates now come out with ads about illegal immigration and some of these other social issues. So it's not like it's not a new era completely in the sense to where, the Republican, party, which is the dominant party in the state, has, shifted tons to the middle. Or at least the candidates don't believe so.
Well, I mean, maybe Jess can talk about this, but aren't Republicans in a stage right now where they're trying to find themselves a little bit, especially on the national stage? We have a new president and a new political attitude all across the nation. In Oklahoma, maybe not so much, until you realize that Republicans endorsed and passed probably the largest tax increase in history, and the first one definitely in almost 3 decades. So who are Republicans? I think is a question that voters are going to have to think about pretty hard, and candidates are going to have to define for themselves as they present themselves to voters.
Yeah, and what do they want the Republican Party to be? Because it's very different right now in rhetoric and in action. The Oklahoma Republican Party is rhetorically very conservative fiscally, socially. In action, it's still conservative socially, but not as much fiscally. I mean, this last legislative session, this governor is not as conservative as rhetorically you often hear Republicans being in action. Yeah. And so there are some differences, and where they go with the Republican gubernatorial primary is a big indication. If they want to go the way this president has gone, maybe you have someone like Kevin Stitt, the businessman with no political experience. If they want to go with a more standard conservative, it's Todd Lamb. If they want to go in a more moderate direction, it's Mick Cornett. And there's some other candidates in there, and they could go different ways. You want to go, hardline social conservative, it's Dan Fisher. So there are just some different approaches there. That would be interesting to see, because I'm not totally sure where most Oklahoma Republicans stand just in terms of Republican voters right now, and which direction they want their party to go, because they don't seem thrilled with Mary Fallin. They largely support Trump, but not in some areas like here in Oklahoma County. So it'll be interesting. I mean, and we really just may not know until some of these votes come in, until we find out in primaries which directions they start going within their own party.
Yeah.
Don't you think that there will be a down ballot effect, depending on if a particular, so let's imagine a precinct votes for Gary Richardson, and in that precinct you also have a choice between an incumbent Republican who voted for the tax increase and a Republican who's trying to unseat that person who's against taxes. Who's the constituency going to vote for? If they support Gary Richardson or someone who is sort of the traditional, what you would consider a conservative sort of anti-tax and vocally at it, are they also going to support the legislative candidate who more closely aligns to that political philosophy?
Yeah, I wonder, that's a great point. I mean, I wonder if you're going to actually see some. I think you could see some voters who would say, you know, I support the tax increase, even though I'm anti-tax. I feel like you had to do something, but it's going to not be inclined to vote for the lawmaker that they think is more likely to vote for another tax increase. I mean, you know, I haven't heard anybody say that we're in this new era of tax and spend in Oklahoma. I don't think that's true at all. But if you're a Democrat or a progressive thinking that, you know, hey, maybe the legislature is moving a little bit more to the middle when you just saw this big tax increase, I think it could be the opposite. It could be after this big tax package, voters' appetite may be even more anti-tax now. I mean, because I do think that there was some polling that showed and some other evidence that showed that even conservative members of the conservative voters thought, you know, we have to do something. You know, maybe we do have a revenue problem, you know, and not just a spending problem here. But now that this big tax package has been approved, I wonder if your average conservative anti-tax voter is going to be like, well, now I'm even more skeptical how money gets spent. Now I'm even more determined to see audits and to make sure we're giving you even more money. And so now you have to be extra, you know, careful and responsible with it. And now we definitely don't want to see any more tax increases.
Yeah. Something to watch out for in the primaries.
Yeah.
I think that voter is probably the one who has the enthusiasm, is more willing to go to the polls. Primaries are a run to the right or a run to the left, depending on which party you're in, because those are the voters who come out. The really dedicated voters are more inclined to be conservative or liberal, depending on, again, on which party you're in. And the Republican Party more likely to be more conservative. So those voters are more inclined to come out in a primary, and that's why you have candidates that run to the right. So there's an enthusiasm gap right now. That's Democrats have the enthusiasm on their side. That's why we talk about November probably being good for Democrats nationwide and in the state. It's the enthusiasm gap. You have Democrats who are really enthused, and you have Republican voters who, again, because of that ambiguity that we just talked about, not knowing exactly where their party stands, and some faction breaking off within the party, Republicans are just going to be inclined to not be as enthused unless it's really their candidate in the gubernatorial race. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah,
a lot to watch.
Yeah, I mean, and it also, like, what else is on the ballot? So in November, there's potential that there could be a state question or an initiative to remove the tax increase, which may actually inspire those who supported it, more educators to come out and say, man, we fought for this. We don't, we're even more, frustrated now. We're going to go out there. There's some schools that are closing down. UConn is not going to have school on election day. Trying to mobilize the attention on that. Then in June, we have the medical marijuana state question. You wonder what kind of voter does that bring out? Does that bring out maybe more conservative voters like, I'm not so sure that this is what I want to see, or the opposite? I mean, and that's I mentioned earlier in this segment that maybe lawmakers may be back at the Capitol. That's one thing that you've reported on, is that if this thing gets passed, if the medical marijuana question passed, there's still a lot to be decided. Lawmakers may return to make some of those decisions, right?
Right, and I was talking to the House floor leader today, and he told me that it's not a guarantee that they come back if medical marijuana passes. Obviously, there is some regulation that might need to happen. It kind of depends on what the agencies who would be tasked with overseeing implementation of that, if these agencies can implement their own policies and regulations beforehand, or if it's going to take an act of the legislature, which can only really takes a couple of weeks. If they need that to get done. Obviously, the rulemaking process takes a long time. You introduce the rule, the next meeting, the next month, you debate it, and then it goes into effect a little bit after that. So there's going to be there is a lot of discussion still happening, even today, and that will happen over the next couple of months to determine whether the agencies can handle or can handle the medical marijuana infrastructure that's going to crop up if Oklahomans pass it.
Yeah.
Not to mention the agency tasked with enforcing those is under federal investigation right now, the Department of Health.
Yeah,
that complicates things a little bit.
That does complicate things. So, well, big tax package already approved. Are we going to see pot approved? What year is this? Who? You're right. There are a lot of questions about who is the Oklahoma voter right now.
I'll get young Democrats out quite a bit, though. That question will get some demographics who don't come out in large numbers. I think would be more inclined to come out. That can have an effect in. Not to shift topics too much, but the 5th District congressional race where you have a lot of Democrats running who they're more inclined to support in that. I don't want to speculate too much there.
Yeah.
I mean, but you may have certain candidates who benefit from a better turnout from young Democrats and more liberal Democrats who are more inclined to support something like marijuana.
Yeah, well, no, definitely. Those state questions definitely influence who comes out to vote. And I think in June, I mean, obviously the GOP primary is probably going to be one of the big things to watch, but that medical marijuana will probably be right up there. And so a lot of people are going to probably go to the polls just for that. And then they're going to be asked to also cast a ballot for a few other races as well.
Yeah, well, they have to be registered to vote. And last day to register to vote for this election is June 1st. So they've got less than a month. If you're not registered to vote, you've got less than a month to go get your registration.
Yeah. Well, if you're listening or watching this show, of course you're registered to vote, right? If you're of voting age, of course you're registered to vote. If you're watching Political State, I don't know what you're doing if you're not a registered voter, spending your time watching this. So,
but thanks for watching, regardless of who you are.
Well, he thanks you.
Regardless of what.
Then stop right now and go register to vote. Pause it right now. We'll wait. We won't. Well, that's going to do it for this week's episode of Political State. We'll end right now to give you a chance to register to vote, and we look forward to hearing that you did by the time next week for next week's episode. Well, guys, thanks for joining me. As always, with Justin and Dale, I'm Ben with the Oklahoman. This has been another episode of Political State. We'll see you next Friday.